I used to work mid-shifts for a couple of years. I would get off work around 2 AM, be at the parking lot in the building basement by around 2:30 or 3 AM. One time, when I got off the elevator, there was a guy wearing the maintenance uniform sweeping the floor. He was not the usual guy that I see when I get off my shift. I was friends with the guards, receptionists, and maintenance people at my building, you see. I always bring them coffee from our pantry, and sometimes the occasional packed bread from our vending machine. I wasn't sure who this new guy was, and for some reason, I was creeped out by him. Maybe because I could not see his face. His shoulder-length black hair was covering it. So instead of giving him the coffee I was holding, I decided to walk straight to my car. I could hear my heels clicking on the floor, but then I also heard a second set of footfall. I walked faster and noticed that whoever was following me walked faster too. I started to run. My car has keyless entry, so I just pushed the button and literally jumped in, pulled the door closed, and clicked the remote button to lock the car. It was the new maintenance guy. He was smiling and trying to open my car door, pressing his face against my window. He wasn't saying anything, only smiling while trying to open my car. Now, my car is set to go on alarm if the door was locked using the remote and was started from inside. So, I proceeded to start the engine and the alarm went off. The guy stopped trying to open my door, stood straight, gave me a salute, and walked away. After what felt like hours, the building guard and the maintenance guy that was usually assigned to my parking floor approached my car. They were surprised to find me inside. The coffee spilled all over me while I was sobbing. I told them what happened. Neither one of them knew who the guy I was describing was. After that incident, there were more guards assigned in the parking areas, doing rounds hourly. I never saw that guy anymore, and hope to never see him again. This also made me more careful whenever I go out into the parking area. I always have a can of pepper spray handy, and I added a whistle on my ID lanyard and bag straps for added precaution. I'm a 22-year-old female, but this story took place when I was 20 and had just moved back in with my parents. They live in a relatively safe neighbourhood where you don't hear of any crimes more serious than petty theft from unlocked cars, but at this time, my city was experiencing a string of non-violent home invasions. It would start with the homeowner noticing that their garage door opener would go missing from their cars, and within a few days, they would wake up to find their house had been robbed and ransacked overnight. It took a couple of weeks and several robberies to occur for our police department to connect the dots between the garage door opener being taken and the house being robbed, to understand that the robbers were only targeting houses with cars parked outside and being left unlocked. While living in my parents', I had to park my car in the street alongside our driveway, as our garage was only big enough to fit 2 cars, my mum and my dad's, and during the summer, my mum's car and our boat. My dad would park in the driveway. Anyway, this particular night was a Friday, and my boyfriend was working late, so my mum and I decided to have a movie night in our living room. Now, to understand the story, I'll explain the layout of my house. We always entered our house through our garage, never our front door. When you're walking through the garage, you walk immediately into our living room, which is connected to our kitchen. Right to your immediate right is our staircase to our basement. Now, it was about midnight when our movie ended and my mum had been washing towels. Before going to bed, she decided to go downstairs and switch the towels over into the dryer. I stayed on the couch and waited for her to come back up. As I was waiting, I heard a noise that made me jolt out of my seat. Was that our garage door? I asked myself. I waited and continued listening. I heard the door move all the way up. Before giving it much thought, I ran to the door and locked the deadbolt. The only people with garage door openers to my house were my mum, my dad, and me, and we were all in the house. The only other way into the garage was to enter the key code into the pad, but again, the only people that knew the code were my parents, my boyfriend, my brother who lived a few hours away, and myself. I ran downstairs and asked my mum if she too had heard the garage door. She said she hadn't, but she hadn't been listening. She asked if I locked the door. When I said I had, she shrugged her shoulders and said that we'd assess the damage in the morning if they would have stolen something from the garage. By that she figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me and that no one had opened the garage. I was pleased with this answer, and really I was quite unnerved. We went into our rooms and I decided to call my boyfriend. I didn't tell him about the experience, but instead asked him about work. He lived about 3 cities away and worked in the same city. He said he'd just closed and had picked up some Taco Bell. I told him I missed him and wished he could be there to spend the night with me. We hung up and I turned to Netflix to ease my mind. About 45 minutes later, the lights in my driveway came on. These are motion activated lights. Again, that uneasy feeling crept its way into my body. I slowly peeled myself off my bed and made my way to my open window, and out of nowhere, my boyfriend pops up. I covered my mouth and tried to hold my fear. "Did I get you?" he asked. "You arsehole." "I'm here to spend the night," he said. I was excited and told him to meet me at the front door, as it would be quieter than opening the garage door. "Oh yeah, I was going to ask. Why is your garage door still open? And why is the light on?" I was shocked. I rushed to the door to let him in, and we closed the garage door behind him. I told him what I'd experienced earlier, and with a determined look on his face, he grabbed our biggest knife and walked around the house upstairs and downstairs, checking every room. But there was nobody there. So I, a 25-year-old female, am told that I look 16 or 17, and it has been a bit troublesome at times, because there's a ton of creeps out there who like teens. Whether this factors into the reason it's not uncommon this happens, I don't know. Either way, the creeps. But I keep 2 knives and mace on me. Another thing to keep in mind is that someone I already knew had assaulted me just weeks prior, so I was already afraid that either they or their friends would follow me, because of indirect threatening words and their behaviours. So I worked late, the 9 till 12 shift. I was walking home. It was by a busy street, and a man who was standing behind an apartment gate said, "Ma'am," and then once again, "Ma'am." I continued to walk. It was rather windy. The wind blew past my ears, which made it harder to listen for footsteps, so I instead was using the reflection of passing cars and also shadows for my blind spots. I turned the corner into my neighbourhood, looking behind me as I turned, and no one was there. Good, I thought. I continued walking, yet this feeling of being watched was eerie. And then another street came for me to cross, and I looked behind me. A faint silhouette? Or was it a shadow? As I looked at it, it seemed to be moving. I thought to myself, there's a good chance that it's a person, and to stay calm. I crossed the street and continued walking, keeping the possibility I was being followed on my radar. There was a house up ahead with tall hedges, which I was going to use to take a longer look. And also, another house with 2 large Dobermans that always wake up their owners when I walk by it. At times, I would use the Doberman house to see how many houses away I am from whoever follows me, as this has happened before. I came up to the hedges and looked behind me. Nothing. It was extremely dark and windy, just the worst for seeing if you're being followed. So I kept walking and changed direction just in case. I stood behind a large tree to see if anyone would walk by in the old direction I was walking, or turn the corner into my new direction. But to my dismay, the house had a motion detection light, and my shadow was cast all the way across the street. Of course, just what I wanted to happen. Perfect. Why not just display to the person following me that I'm chilling behind this huge tree? Wonderful. No one walked past. So I went to the other side of the street and looked back again. I saw a silhouette of a man walking. I turned to leave and he said, "Ma'am." I kept going and he said, "Ma'am, can you tell me where so-and-so street is?" I replied, "Sorry, no, I don't know where it is." His hands concealed in his pockets and never moving out of them, not knowing if he had a weapon, a knife or a gun. Being just bigger and stronger than me was reason enough for me to stay back, unaware of any possible intentions. We'd been at a distance of 1.5 houses away from each other at this point, and he was standing in the middle of the street. Just this completely black silhouette standing in the shadow between the dim streetlights. He walked closer, and I took a few steps back. The area he had walked into, the light from a street lamp hit his lower torso, a grey sweater with a design on it. Then I remembered a few roads back, the man that was behind the fence had a grey sweater on, and the same design. He stopped and said, "I'm not a creep, I just need directions." I said once again, "No, sorry, I don't know where that is," which honestly I didn't. He took 4 or 5 steps forward, and I walked backwards, meeting his pace, and he said, "I couldn't hear you." He then stopped walking forward. I replied, "No." Then he asked, "Do you have a lighter?" That's 3 attempts he had made to convince me to come closer. Man, I just said no again and turned around. It was definitely time to go. We'd been much further away from the apartments at this time. There was no way a grown man had any good intentions following me down a dim neighbourhood to ask for directions, and then a lighter when it was apparent that I wasn't planning on closing any space between us. I had the distance, and I could tell our loudest conversation from him trying to talk must have gotten someone's attention in the homes, and if not, the Doberman house had been only 1 house away. I had distance, awareness. I wasn't falling for it. I walked in a huge pattern and just went inside. I had already had enough to think about and deal with, but I'm definitely not going that way again. I just can't catch a break.